Hello everyone, and I hope that you're doing well. Today we're doing a BGCSE Biology Paper 2 review, and this was from the year 2022. Please remember, before you start the examination, always write the school number, your candidate number, your surname, and also your initials. As always, please remember to read through the instructions carefully before the examination starts. If you should have any questions or queries, please clarify those with the examiner before you begin. Now let us jump to question number one. And question number one reads that the diagram represents a food chain found in a Bahamian ecosystem. You can study the food chain starting with the phytoplankton, zooplankton, coral, butterfly fish, and then the shark. Now the first part of this question asks, what does a food chain shows? And a food chain shows a linear feeding relationship. You can also state it as that it shows a linear flow of energy between organisms, or you can state that it shows a single path for energy flow between organisms. So anywhere along that line, you'll be okay. Now for part B of this question, now it states that identify the producer, herbivore, and secondary consumer in the food chain. And if you should go back to the food chain, the producer is the first organism, and so here we have the phytoplankton as the producer. The herbivore is the zooplankton, and the secondary consumer is the coral. Relatively easy question. Next part of this question is to identify a predator-prey relationship shown in the food chain, and a very good example of this is the shark and the butterfly fish. The shark is the predator, the butterfly fish will be the prey. As you notice in the food chain, the shark is eating the butterfly fish. So the shark will hunt and eat the butterfly fish. So that is definitely a predator-prey relationship. Now, for part D of this question, it states that state a term that is used to describe the type of organism that feeds on, and let's just highlight that, feeds on dead and waste materials. And so if the organism feeds on dead and decay materials, then that is a detritivore. And I just want to make a clarification right here that a detritivore is different from a decomposer. A detritivore will eat the dead and decaying material directly, so they will digest it because they have mouth. For example, crab and earthworms. However, a decomposer will break down the dead and decaying material first. So they break down the dead materials, and then now they will absorb the nutrients while it is breaking down. All right, so they actually release like enzymes first, start to break down the dead material, and then they absorb the nutrients from it. So it's kind of, they are different. All right, and so for part two of this is a state why organisms that feed on dead and waste materials are important in food chains. And detritivores, they are similar to decomposers in terms of the importance. And so they reduce waste. All right. And so the pileup of waste, the pileup of dead organisms. And in that case, now they help to reduce the possibility of diseases. Also, they help to recycle nutrients, and they also serve as important food sources. So detritivores themselves, they are food sources in a food chain. All right, for part E, which is the last part of this question, and it's a state one difference between a food chain and a food web. And so I have two notation right here. One is that a food chain shows a single path for energy to flow, while a food web shows more than one path for energy to flow. All right, and you can also state it that in a food chain, it shows only one food source, while a food web shows more than one food source. All right. So that is different ways you actually could state the same thing. Now, for question number two, it's a diagram represents a cross section of a dicotyledonous leaf as seen under a microscope. All right, so I'll this already labeled, so you can look at the labelings, pause and look at the labelings. All right, and also understand the functions and the position of these things in a leaf. All right, now it says state the main function of the leaf or of a leaf. And the main function of a leaf is really to produce food by photosynthesis, right? Or to carry out photosynthesis. So anywhere that along that line, you will be okay. Now for part B, so using the letters from a diagram, identify the structures responsible for each of the following. And so for transporting water, that is the xylem, and the xylem is labeled as X. Let's just quickly go back up there. So the xylem is always on the top of the vascular bundle in the leaf. All right, so the xylem is on top, the phloem is at the bottom in this vascular bundle. And so transport sugars, which is the phloem, and that is Y. And for gaseous exchange is the stomata, and that is Z. All right, for part C of this question, it's a name organelle W. And the cell layer, and this to say the cell layer, I must make sure I like that. And the cell layer within which this organelle is found. And so W is, let's go back and show you. Notice they are found in these elongated cells. And so W is the chloroplast. All right, and the chloroplast, the name of a cell layer, they are found within the palisade mesophyll layer based on what is shown in the diagram. And it's the explanation of adaptation. And so they're closer to the top to absorb maximum sunlight. So they need to be on top there so they can absorb maximum sunlight. All right. And also the chloroplasts, they contain chlorophyll. So the closer to the top, they contain chlorophyll. You can add that piece in. I missed that piece out. So they contain chlorophyll and they're closer to the top to absorb maximum sunlight. All right. And also, again, elongated and contain a lot of chloroplasts. That's another adaptation for those cell, which is the palisade cells. They're elongated. All right. And for part D, it said the diagram shows a prickle pear, which is a cactus commonly found growing in the Bahamian ecosystem. And it suggests why the stem of the prickle pear cactus is fleshy and the leaves are needle-like. So I kind of separate the points because they're actually different points. Notice we're looking for 3 points here. And so fleshy is to store water, and the fleshiness also allow them to store food. And the needle-like leaves now will help to reduce water loss by transpiration because, of course, you have less surface area, less stomata, so you have less evaporation of water from the leaf-like structures. All right, and that's the end of question 2. For question number 3 is carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are food nutrients, which are all part of a balanced diet. And it's define the term diet. It didn't say define a balanced diet, just a diet. And so diet now is the amount and kind of food or nutrients typically consumed by a person or organism. Now, for a balanced diet, it would be different because that would be consuming all the food nutrients in their correct proportions, which is a different thing. So please be careful when you're answering these questions. Look at the words that they use or the terms that they use, because sometimes you may see diet and in your head you may think balanced diet, but no, diet is different from a balanced diet. Now, for part 2, is a name one element contained in all 3 nutrients. And for carbohydrate, fats, and proteins, they contain CHO. So you can list any of these, which are the common elements, carbon, hydrogen, or oxygen. Any of those will be correct. And it's a name the basic unit of protein. And protein, the basic unit, which is called the monomer, it is amino acids. So amino acids are the basic units for proteins. Now, for part B of this question, it's a diagram shows the component parts of a fat molecule. And a fat molecule here is also called a lipid or called triglyceride, just to make mention of that. All right. And so fats are example of lipids, I should say. And so fats are called triglycerides. And so it's a label the diagram to identify the 2 different component parts of a fat molecule. And so we have glycerol and we have the fatty acids. So we have 1 glycerol and 3 fatty acids that make up a triglyceride or a fat. For the next part of this question, part C, let's quickly take it off. All right. So it said here now, it said the table below shows how the energy requirements of a boy change with age. All right. And so the chart will give you the age, and then it also give you here now the energy requirement per day in kilojoules. And it said describe and explain the trend shown by the data in the table. And the description here is that as age increases, the energy requirement also increased. All right. And if you notice the numbers, that's straightforward. And then now an explanation is a simple way here is that as a person gets older, they tend to involve in more physical activities, hence more energy is required. And so also additionally, energy is required for growth and development. So as a person grow and develop, all the cellular activities require energy for you to make new cells for growth and development. And of course, the person tend to be more active, doing more stuff carrying more weight and load and all those type of stuff. So therefore, energy is required much more. All right, and so it's a state to health issues associated with intake of excess fat in the diet. And so you could have coronary heart diseases, so blockage of arteries and so on. Diabetes, typically type 2 diabetes, and obesity as well could be other problems. Of course, there could be more problems as well compared to these, but yeah, those are the three basic ones. Question number 4 is a diagram shows a system found in the human body. All right, and so the labelings are given here for you. We have kidney, we have the ureter, we have the urethra, we have the urinary bladder, we have the sphincter muscle. All right, and I want to make note of these blood vessels. You cannot state which one is which because for diagram like this, you need arrows to indicate which one is which. But typically, I want to tell you that what you can use, there's something I want to point out, a matter of fact, if you think about it. These bigger blood vessels, they are arteries and veins. And so one would be the aorta, one would be the vena cava. And the smaller ones will be the renal artery, renal vein, respectively. All right, so you need to know the difference between the different diagrams and how to actually label them. Now for part A of this, and part A1 is a name. We say what is the name of the system? And the name of the system is the urinary system, also called excretory system, right? But it's actually the urinary system. It produces urine, right? Also called the excretory system. So there's a state two functions of this system, and one function is to excrete urea, and it's excrete urine in the form of urine. And 2 is to control the amount of water in the body, and the process is called osmoregulation. All right, so that's 2 function of the urinary system or the excretory system. A part B is to name the parts of the diagram labeled L and M, and L is a ureter and M is a urethra. So notice M is the last one leading out of the body, so that's the urethra, and the ureter, which is L, comes from the kidneys into the urinary bladder. All right, so next part here, part C, so draw a line on the diagram to the bladder and label it, and I'll already do that, so we don't need to go back. Well, let me just quickly go back to it. So the urinary bladder is here, all right, which was labeled, and then it said now, so state the function of the bladder, and the function of bladder is it temporarily stores urine. All right, next part of the question is this, part D. It's a table shows the water intake and water loss for a 80 kg man in one day. It said the amount of water given out was equal to the amount of water taken in. So water intake and water loss, the same amount was taken in, the same amount was lost. All right, so let's identify source X and process Y. And so source X is a very large quantity of water compared to food. And so that will be like drinking water directly. So it's drinking. All right, so drinking water or bottled water, whatever you want to say, but water source is a water source, drinking of water directly. And so the process here, Y, if you look at it, you have urination, you have expiration, which is breathing out, and then you have egestion. So the only process that is missing there is actually sweating. All right, so Y is sweating. And now we say calculate the volume of water lost by process Y. And how to get this is really to have the total and you subtract all these from the total. So you just say 2.25 minus 1.5 plus 0.1 plus 0.1, and that will be 1.7. And so 2.25 minus 1.7 gives 0.55 liters. Right, because look at the top of the table, it measures in liters. For the next question, our next part of this question, it said name one process that will result in increased water loss while running a race. If you're running a race, there are 2 possibilities right here. One is by sweating or expiration, because when you're running a race, you tend to breathe more or breathe faster rate of breathing, because you want more oxygen in, and so you have to let out more carbon dioxide as well. And so while you're doing that, you're releasing water. But sweating will be the most, and expiration will give you amount. But any of them do increase water loss. So increase sweating and increase expiration rate. All right. Question number 5. is a cell division is very important in the formation of an embryo following fertilization of an egg. You see the diagram shows one way that twins can be formed. And so you notice you have a sperm, you have egg, and that is a plus sign. That means they come together, you get zygote, and then you have embryo, then you have the twin embryos. All right, so let's see what they're asking us here now. So what can be said about the genetic material, DNA, of twins of this type? And so the DNA will be the exact same thing. All right, so for part two is what evidence shown on the diagram support the answer to part one, part A1. And so for them to have the same DNA, it's simply because they came from the same sperm and the same egg. So the same egg, same sperm that formed the zygote, and also the embryos were formed from the same zygote. So any of these will be acceptable, all right, in supporting your answer for part A1. All right, so let's go to part three. It's a state the type of cell division that produce the egg cell. And so generally gametes, which are sperms or eggs, they're produced by meiosis, all right, which means that they're haploid cells. All right, for part B, it's a place an X in each row of a table to indicate whether the cells shown in the diagram are haploid or diploid. And haploid means half the number of chromosomes, diploid means the full number of chromosomes. And so egg cell will have half, that means it is haploid. So notice it's half haploid. Cell in the embryo will be formed from the zygote to the combinations as a diploid cell. Sperm cells, just like egg cell, they're haploid. Zygote is a combination of egg and sperm, so therefore it's diploid. All right, and so let's go into part C. For part C, the diagram shows the 4 stages of cell division occurring in a cell in an embryo, and it said the stages are shown in the order in which they occur. So they show in the order, and so the order will be prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, just like that. All right, and so just to make a mention right here that cell division that takes place within the embryo is mitosis. All right, so they're in order, which is nice. And so for part one, it's a state the name of a type of cell division shown in the diagram. Give a reason for your choice, and this is mitosis, as mentioned a little earlier. And they said the reason for that because it occurs in the embryo. Not only that, just to give you some other reasons here, it's that only 2 daughter cells were produced. So once it produces 2 daughter cells, that's definitely mitosis. Producing 4 daughter cells, you know, that is meiosis. And also a point to note that the daughter cells and the parent cell have the same number of chromosomes. All right, and if you look at the diagram, you actually will see that. So notice each part will be separated into 2 separated cells. And so if you notice the number of chromosomes here, you have 4. And what you can actually count is the centromere. So those are a small round spot. Those are the centromere, which means 4 chromosomes. And if you look at the metaphase, you also see the 4 centromere right here. However, in anaphase, because the separation of the chromatids, you have 8 centromeres, which mean 8 chromosomes in this case, a total of 8 in one cell, but once they separate, you're going to have 4 in each. All right, so we know that they have the same number of chromosomes. All right, for part 2, is a state the name of stage 2 shown in the diagram, and that is the metaphase. And it said describe what is happening at stage 2 in the diagram. And in metaphase, the chromosomes align in the middle of the cell. And if you go back to it, you actually see that the chromosomes, they are aligned in the middle of a cell, and that part is called the metaphase plate. All right. All right, so let's go to the next question, and we are on question number 6. For question number 6, the diagram shows an experiment that was set up to investigate osmosis. Here it said that biskin tubing acts as a semi-permeable membrane, and we should know what a semi-permeable membrane is. And a semi-permeable membrane is any membrane that only allows certain substances to pass through based on their size. All right, and so you can see the diagram. We have, just want to point out something in here. In the biskin tubing, we have sucrose solution. However, in the beaker on the outside here, we have water. And I'm assuming that this is pure water. Well, it doesn't matter if it's pure or not, but they say water, which means we can assume that it's pure. All right, so here's a defined osmosis. And osmosis can be defined in so many ways. And so I kind of put a compound definition here, just to kind of bring out certain points. And so The first part here said that the movement, which is a diffusion of water molecules from an area of high concentration, which is from a dilute solution, to an area of low concentration, which is a concentrated solution across a semi-permeable membrane. All right, so I just put some words in there to kind of guide you in terms of what is happening. So the particles are moving from higher to lower. That means a diffusion process. So osmosis is a diffusion of water, but it must come from a dilute solution to a more concentrated solution, and it must go across a semi-permeable membrane. All right. Part B, it said predict what will happen to the level of sucrose solution in the capillary tube over a period of 1 hour. And just to go back to the diagram to demonstrate this, is because the water, as I said, if it's considered to be pure, then what will happen here is that water molecule will leave from the beaker into the viscous tubing. And so water moving that way, then what you're going to have here is that the volume of the solution in the viscous tubing or the capillary tube will increase. All right, because water moves from the beaker inwards. So let's go back to the question. All right, and so yes, we say here that the level of sucrose solution will increase, and the explanation for that because water will leave the beaker where there are more available water molecules into the viscous tubing where there are less available water molecules. All right, and so for part C of this now, it states that viscous tubing is semi-permeable. What does semi-permeable mean? And semi-permeable mean that it only allows certain size, which is the smaller molecules, to pass through. All right, and please note that water will go through the viscous tubing, but sugar solution will not, or sugar will not. Sugar itself will not pass or able to move through it because sugar molecules are too large to pass through. This is not a part of the answer, but there's something for you to take home. All right, so that's why osmosis is the movement of water because the molecules of water are normally smaller than sugar or salts. All right, or even minerals. All right. Part D. It's in a second investigation, red blood cells and palisade cells were placed in a concentrated solution, salt solution, as a matter of fact. It's a complete diagram to show each type of cell after 1 hour in the concentrated salt solution. And so the drawing was done. So we have the red blood cell at the start. And so the red blood cell may look something like this. The fact that it will get smaller. And the reason for that, if it's in concentrated salt solution, water will leave the red blood cell and go out. And so the red blood cell will shrink and become flaccid. For the palisade cell, I just want to point this one out. Oh, jump too far. Go back up a little bit. Right. Now for the palisade cell, what will happen in the palisade cell is that the size remain the same. So it's not drawn, mine is not perfectly the same, but once you draw it, pretty much the same. So notice the same size, same shape. However, the internal parts will be different because the cell membrane will move away from the cell wall. This vacuole will also shrink, so you have a smaller vacuole. And the reason for that is because water will leave the cell out into the concentrated salt solution. All right. And now the last part here said label the diagram of the palisade cell at the start of the start to identify two structures. So we have 4 structures that we can identify here. We have the cell wall, we have the vacuole, we have the chloroplast, and we have the nucleus. It's very difficult to see a cell membrane, but a cell membrane should be there because there's actually 2 membranes. In the second one, I actually showed the cell membrane moving away from the cell wall. In this case, because it's so close, you cannot see the difference between them because the cell membrane will press against the cell wall, right, for a turgid plant cell. Question number 7 is the diagram shows a section through the human heart, and you can look at the labelings. I can pause and look at the labelings to make sure you understand the labelings and know the correct labelings for the heart. It's a name the part labeled B and E, and so B is the aorta and E is the right atrium. And remember, and looking at the diagram, your right side is the left side, just to make mention of that, okay? So your right side is the left side, the left is the right. All right, and so just to mention there. Now for part B, it's on the diagram, draw 1 arrow in vessel A and 1 arrow in vessel B to show the direction of blood flow. And let me just go back to that right now to show you. So notice both of them are going out actually, because what we should know, I'm going to just put some extras here. What we should know that blood enters the atrium. So blood comes into the atrium, then it goes into the ventricle, and then it will go all the way out through the arteries. And so the pulmonary artery and the aorta, they are two arteries. And so blood comes through the atrium. Blood is always coming into the atrium, then into the ventricle, and then it will push up into the artery. All right, so that's for that. All right, and those are simple things that you need to know to do if we go into in this examination. You may see some of those type of questions. So right here now said on the diagram, okay, well, it did that part. So part C now, it's a name part D and state its function. And part D is a tricuspid valve. And the function of a tricuspid valve is really to prevent the backflow of blood into the atrium, causing blood only to flow towards the pulmonary artery. All right, so once the ventricle contracts, then it will push blood up into the pulmonary artery towards the lungs. All right. For part D, is a state why the muscular wall of part C is thicker than the muscular wall of part F. And if we go back to the diagram, I'm going to notice here that part C, it will pump blood into the aorta, which goes to the body, but part F will pump blood into the pulmonary artery that is going towards the lungs. So that's only one place, right? All over the body is many, many places and a greater distance. So here now, why it is thicker is simply to generate more pressure in the blood on that side. And a point to note is that a higher pressure is required on that side in order to pump blood to the rest of the body. Or you can even add to this because it pumps blood at a greater distance compared to F, because F is only pumping to the heart, while C is pumping to all over the body, which is a greater distance, which requires more pressure. Again, it's 2-mark question. Again, you need to be precise, very specific with your answers. Again, it is quality over quantity. All right, for part E of this, so the graph now shows the heart rates of 3 men at rest during exercise and after exercise. All men carried out the same exercise routine for the same length of time. All right, and so we have John, we have Patrick, and we have Colin. It said recovery rate after exercise for Patrick is 25 minutes. And I just kind of work it out to show you how they actually did it. So for Patrick here, if you notice Patrick, highest point, all right. So it said the recovery rate, I should actually say. So if you notice here, his highest point for Patrick is 20 minutes, all right, and then he recovered back to rest rate here, which is 45. So going to be 45 minus 20 minutes. That's when he was exercising to when his heart rate come back to normal. And so it's 45 minus 20. So they cannot give you that as a guide to answer the next question, because they ask you, what is recovery time for John? And so the recovery time for John, if you look at John here, John, the highest point as well is also 20. All right, but John takes a quicker time to recover, which is 40. And so it will be 20 minus 20, which 40 minus 20, I should say, which give it 20 minutes. All right, which is a faster recovery rate than actually Patrick. And if you notice the graph here, John resting rate starts before Patrick as well. All right. Part 2 is a suggest which of the men is likely to exercise the most. And it's a use evidence from the graph to support your answer. And Colin is that guy. Colin is that guy. If you look at Colin's heart rate is very low. It's lower than both of them all the way through, no matter what time. For the same timing, at the same pace, Colin's heart rate is always lower than both of them. All right, so the answer here now is said that at rest, his heart rate is lower. So Colin's heart rate is lower at rest. This means that his heart muscle are stronger and capable to pump more blood in a single beat compared to John and Patrick. All right. All right. So his heart is really strong because of that continuous exercising. He used to doing that. So his heart used to be pumping great volume of blood in a very short time. Question number 8, which is the last question. It said the bar chart shows the age distribution of the human population in the Bahamas in 2017. So on the y-axis, we have the percentage of population. Under the x, we have the age. in terms of years. And it said which age group make up the largest percentage of the Bayman population. If you look at the graph here, it is 15 to 29. 15 to 29 is the highest population. All right. And it's a calculate the difference between the percentage of the population in 30 to 44 age group and also the percentage of the population 60 to 74 group. And so on estimate on the graph, you can use a ruler to actually do this to make sure you get the right number once you figure out what the scale is. And so if you look at it, this will be about halfway here, so it'll be 22.5. And then this here will be just below the 10, so that will be about 9. Again, it could be 9.5 or 8.5, but I just say 9, all right? And so it'll be 22.5 minus 9, give a 13 percentage. And so the percentage there is 13.5. For part 2, it suggests 2 reasons for the difference between the percentage of population in the 30 to 40 age group and the percentage of the population in 60 to 74 age group. And again, you can answer this in many different ways. They're looking for 2 points and they ask for 2 ways. And so I can give you a number of ways right here. And so among the 60 to 74 age group, you can have a higher mortality rate, which means death rate will be higher among that group. And also you could have higher birth rate 30 to 40 years prior. That means you have more persons 30 years ago, a lot of persons born at that time. So therefore, by the time they reach 30, 34, the population will be high, providing there's no death. All right. Among the older age group, the 60 to 74, you could have more complications or sickness, death among that older group, which is the 60 to 74 age group. You can also have advances in medical technologies as well, which increase life expectancies. That means, which means a younger group, you'd have you have a higher population because, of course, you can treat sickness and those things. So then again, when you state these things, you can also explain them. All right, you're looking for 2, so you can just state 1 and explain, say the next one and explain. All right, so make sure that they get your full marks. Healthier life choices as well could cause a higher population among that group because they could be exercising more, they could start eating more healthy, and so on, compared to the previous age group because now they're older. All right, for part B, it said the graph shows the age distribution data collected over the years 1950 to 2000 in the Bahamas. And if you look at this graph, you have the number of people per thousands here, and then you have the years, which is from 1950 to 2000 right here, and this give you the age category on the side right here, right? And so the question here says compare the number of people in the 25 to 64 age group with the number of people in the 65 age group over the time period from 1950 to 2000. And so if you look at the age group here, straight off the bat, a matter of fact, if you look at the graph carefully, you'd realize that the 25 to 64, you know, this is always increasing, while the 65 is pretty much the same. And so that would be the answer there, is that more people per 1,000 in the 25 to 64 age group compared to 65, right? And also there's a steady increase within the 25 to 65 age group, while the 65 and over age group remains relatively the same over the years. All right, so there's pretty much no change in that. However, the 25 to 65, there's an increase, all right, over the number of years. All right, and so for part 2, so identify the evidence on the graph that suggests that the birth rate decreased from 1960 to 1980. If you look at the graph here, and you're talking about birth rate, so birth rate is always a lower number, which is 0, which is birth is 0 age up to 14, right? That's his younger group. So notice this line here. From 1960 would be somewhere here, and 1980 would be somewhere here. So notice for that period of time, this line is the highest from all 4 lines. So this is the highest graph from all 4s. And so let's just go to the answer now that I wrote down. And so there was little to no change in the 0 to 14 age group for that period of time. And in fact, what happened here is that the 25 to 65 age group becomes the highest after that period of time. So what happened there is because after that period of time, this age group was the highest one. So after the 70 years period, which is 1980, I should say, notice that it was no longer the highest. But before that, it was the highest. And so after that period of time, it is no longer the highest because guess what? The 25 to 64 becomes the highest after pretty much in 1980. All right. So before 1980, however, it was really the highest one. All right. And so last part of the question here is so there's three social implications of an increased population. So if you have increased population, you may have increase in crime. All right. More people in any given spot is always problems. All right. So that's why you should avoid crowds. Strain on medical facilities, definitely. Competition for food and other resources too. Higher unemployment, I should say. So higher unemployment, and that could lead to tie into crime as well, and also other things like that, like theft. Also competition for education or lack thereof. And let me explain this a little bit because competition for education, which means that if you have set amount of schools and you have an increased population, then it's be competitive who need to take in who and how much you can take in and all that. And so if you have more students in a class also, then you realize that you may have a lack of knowledge being spread because distractions and all of the problems happening in the classrooms is harder for you to gain that knowledge because you have to compete and you know the one-on-one teaching may not be existing in the class and all different type of problems may take place. So increased spread of diseases. The closer persons are together, the more chances to increase diseases. One, those diseases that are contagious, that are easier spread if you have more people. And not only that, because you have social ills, you have more unprotected sex, people just start getting wild and crazy because of so many people together. Then you spread STDs and all those type of stuff. Number 8, you have more competition for land and so on. All right, so competition for natural resources, land space, to build houses, because the more people you have, the more houses you want as well. And also you put a strain on the natural resources because you have to use natural resources to even build infrastructures and so on. All right, and so this is the end of it. And please, if you have not done so yet, please subscribe. Please share as well. All right, and I wish you good luck on your examination. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.